Welcome everyone from around the globe to the BioAlign Strategies webinar titled Life Science Sales Challenges, How to Align Your Marketing and BD Teams to Build Consistent Sales Pipelines. My name is Jim Serene. I'm the founder and managing director of BioAlign Strategies. I've been in the industry 30 plus years, working with mainly CROs inside their organizations for business and corporate development. And in 2011, I founded BioAlign Strategies, mainly because there was a definite need to build a revenue infrastructure system for smaller companies where there are typically high dollar sales teams that just aren't quite possible. Today's agenda, life science sales challenges, and I'm sure that many of you have seen and experienced a lot of these. We're going to start talking about pipeline instability and long sales cycles, limited networks, if a company has ineffective differentiation, misaligned marketing and BD teams and what they're doing and how that impacts it. And of course, global complexity with compliance barriers. And a very sensitive issue for a lot of companies is underinvestment, simply because they're smaller companies, for an effective sales infrastructure. Also, we're going to be talking about what I refer to as the 80% rule based on data and research on how B2B works. We're going to be looking at the marketing and BD functions and their alignment, if they are aligned, if they're not. We're also going to be looking at what makes an effective sales system. We'll take a look at the impact of aligned marketing and BD on a one-page overview of about 5 years of client data, and we'll do a one-page case study along with Q&A. There will be a couple polls that we're going to look at where you can offer your insight. We want some feedback from you, and there's also going to be a handout at the end of the event. So let's start with pipeline instability. There's typically poor marketing and BD alignment, and the lead qualification and follow-up is inconsistent. There's not a schedule of events that needs to take place. There's inaccurate forecasting, and that's not understanding what the clear conversion stages are from introduction, putting them into the pipeline, and execution to have an engagement. The long and unpredictable sales cycle, this industry, it's driven many times by regulatory delays and, of course, slow sponsored decision making. A weak prospect nurturing, and I can't emphasize this enough, there's a lack of consistent engagement. Very often, sales teams don't hear from somebody after 1 or 2 touches and they go away, and that just kills deals. There's market volatility. Funding shifts, as you know, with M&A activity and policy changes, and it drives a wedge between sales and opportunities. There's limited differentiation. Again, it fails to clearly separate you, and you'll hear me refer to this multiple times. Everyone's a world leader. That's what everybody says, a world leader. Well, what does that mean? And insufficient pipeline diversification. Very often, sales teams will call people they're comfortable with instead of scratching and digging for new prospects in an uncomfortable situation. And it's unfortunate because sales teams tend to get a little comfortable with their relationships and don't want to break into new ones. So the takeaway here is that your pipeline instability reflects a fragmentation of the sales process. But a good revenue infrastructure system can build consistent communication, and it can restore growth. Long sales cycle. Obviously, with complex decision change, there's multiple stakeholders. There's committees, approvals, meetings are delayed, etc. Regulatory hurdles. I've actually worked with several regulatory companies where they help to eliminate these by organizing companies with their regulatory guidance and guidelines early. But again, this extends timelines, sales timelines. High value contracts, that means there's more people involved, there's greater risk, and companies are slower to finalize deals. Insufficient lead nurturing, and I referenced this before. There's weak engagement, it's inconsistent. And this means that the client, potential client, the deal will just fade away because he's not comfortable with how the engagement's going. Fragmentation of marketing and BD collaboration. Again, something that disrupts momentum in the funnel. And it could be, I've actually experienced where there was a delay getting things to market because marketing changed some of the branding. And it took a month and a half, 2 months. Well, that's a missed opportunity with some of the clients that we were targeting. And then, of course, there's market saturation. There's a ton of companies doing a lot of things that are quite similar. There's overlap for buyers, and buyers have to look at this and be able to learn what specific skills that are going to be gained by a relationship with the company. So the takeaway here is that long sales cycles require a need for tighter alignment. Your marketing and BD need to act as one unit. Over-reliance on limited networks. And again, narrow industry circles. If you're a PV company or an AI company dealing mainly with technology, such as CTMS, that limits who you're going to be going after compared to a more broad approach. Recycled outreach. It's the same email coming to the same people. They've seen it, they lose interest. And lack of cross-sector collaboration. There's missed opportunities there where you actually can have, for instance, a data management company working with a phase 1 clinic, bundling the service together. You're partnering, which creates more opportunities for both parties in a non-competitive scenario. Relationship fatigue, and again, it's reliance on a few connections, and it diminishes any type of long-term relationship. Limited visibility, and that's insufficient digital presence. This world is now driven by digital visibility, what people are looking at before they're going to be speaking with you. And I have more data on that a little bit later. But the takeaway is that growth requires expanding reach strategically through regions, digital visibility, and relationship diversification to sustain a good pipeline. Ineffective differentiation. There's generic messaging. You're focusing on services, not outcomes. Again, everyone's a world leader, but if you have a tool, an AI tool, what does it do? Don't say what it does. Show what the impact is, how it's going to save time, how it's going to deliver more accuracy, how it's going to shorten timeline for development. That's what sponsors are looking for. And lack of proof. You're not showing these materials. You're not doing newsletters, webinars, case studies, or white papers to show this data that can demonstrate a measurable impact for them. And competitive similarity. Again, positioning overlaps. Okay, there's a ton of companies offering your types of service. What makes you different? Weak branding. This is inconsistent visual, and it reduces the memorability and credibility for companies. They need to be able to trust you. And then feature over value, and that's what I just referenced. What do you do rather than why it matters, why it makes a difference? Okay, what are the predictable outcomes? So the takeaway is standing out requires. You've got to have distinct positioning, consistent storytelling, and evidence-driven branding. That's what's going to help you differentiate yourself. Misaligned marketing and BD. Okay, there's very often conflicting goals. Inside of marketing, they may have a perspective of a visually aesthetic program that doesn't necessarily maximize data. What does it mean in order to have transparency within an organization? versus they want data on what the metrics are. And this is a real world scenario for me. When I was with the company, they created this translucent leaf showing that there's transparency. You have access to our leadership. But the people were asking for data. They wanted to see what the impact was on what we did. That's what matters. So again, the marketing and BD teams weren't aligned. Inconsistent messaging, and there's mixed value proposition, okay? This slows down decisions within organizations because you're this one day and that the other in their mind. Disjointed handoffs, okay? And that's from poor lead qualification. Very often companies are incentivized by getting meetings. What does that mean if it's a bad meeting? It just wastes everybody's time. And BD gets really irritated and marketing says they're not closing my deals. So there's conflict there. And then data silos where there's, excuse me, limited visibility across systems to help with accurate forecasting. And that's where the metrics aren't aligned. The worst one is fragmented buyer journey, okay? They're experiencing gaps in education. You're in the market, then you disappear. Nothing could be worse than going to a conference one year, not going the next year, because that vendor or the client wasn't necessarily buying ready at that time. But if you're not at the next event, they might think you just closed shop. And that happens. I've seen it dozens of times within this industry. So the takeaway is that alignment amplifies growth. It unifies your message and it makes handoffs and conversions better. Global complexity and compliance barriers. This is a highly regulated industry, as we know. Everything is about mitigating risk. Okay, the challenge is you can have fragmented market access, and that's varying complexities across regions. Okay, the laws are different. Data privacy in the EU and Europe is GDPR compared to what it is with the US. Standards are different, and that makes things a challenge to break into companies and be able to win business. Extended sales cycles, okay? It basically slows down the process. So this consistent cadence of communication and education matters. The inconsistent messaging, again, I just referenced it. There's different cultural and legal expectations of how you communicate with companies. The increased operational costs, okay, adapting materials, trials based on what you need in those regions could delay any types of barrier to entry. And then reduced agility, where teams spend more time navigating approval than pursuing new opportunities. So the takeaway here is without alignment, global complexity and compliance hurdles basically stall and suffocate your pipeline momentum. Underinvestment in sales infrastructure. There's a lot of small companies, growing companies out there, a lot of spin-offs, things like this. So this is a big challenge in the industry, and one of the main reasons why I exist in this market. But there's insufficient collateral materials. They don't realize they have content within their bid defenses and within communication with companies that can guide newsletters, webinars, case studies, white papers, etc. Okay, there's a lot of value inside your organization already that may be underlooked. There's limited enablement tools. What types of CRMs do you have? I know companies that literally are letting their sales teams go out without laptops. They're small enough, they don't understand. It's an older management and founding team, and they're living in the past, quite frankly. And this slows down any type of growth and kills a lot of growth. Inadequate data intelligence. What data they're looking for in the market. Okay, what insight do you have into your leads? And are they prioritizing their leads properly based on timing and ability Can they engage a client because of a tied up vendor list or something like that? Insufficient training and onboarding. A lot of times, smaller companies don't understand what it takes for a BD team to succeed. They think because they love their technology or service, everyone will. So there's not proper training to differentiate your company and really show what the value is. And then there's scaling constraints. Teams can't often expand into new territories simply because of costs. And the takeaway here is that modern sales growth requires investment. It's high dollar money, there's no doubt, but there's ways around that that can mimic what looks like a large sales infrastructure based on how you're working with your digital investments. Now, we'd like to get a little feedback from you. Here's our first poll, and please be honest with yourself and with us. Poll's going to be popping up. What is your biggest sales challenge? You can do multiple answers. That's not a problem. But please take a look at it and give us some good feedback. Okay, thanks for that. We'll take a look at that toward the end. Now we're going to move on to marketing and BD functions. What are they? A lot of people think that they're the same thing. Basically, marketing creates brand awareness and BD identifies the specific people and builds those relationships. So marketing will generate awareness and attract qualified leads and convert the audience interest into measurable growth through communication and their branding. They are the who and what we are. BD builds those relationships that identify specific opportunities within those relationships, and it converts those into qualified prospects. I referenced before where marketing might not really understand what a qualified prospect is versus what a BD team needs. What happens when they're aligned and not aligned? When marketing and BD are not aligned, basically leads stall. Okay, the messaging becomes fractured. There's what's referred to as revenue leaks, where buyers now go with other vendors. They feel that you're just wasting their time. They lose trust, and it's definitely slower growth. But when they're aligned, the messaging becomes unified. The activity is unified. It feeds into a proper system for faster conversion. Your revenue grows. It's definitely more efficient, and you're building stronger relationships because your clients trust your system and process, so they trust the services. Okay, this is a huge impact of what companies are missing. Gartner back in 2020 did a new B2B buying journey. And what they found that it's amazing. Buyers only spend 17% of their time with their vendors. They spend most of the time researching independently online long before vendor contact. You've experienced this and you do it yourself. You're going to look at the website, look at collateral materials, look at case studies, newsletters, webinars, everything before you're vetting potential vendors before you want to communicate with them. It's just how the world works now. So the takeaway is that your clients perform this research to shortlist vendors before they even are willing to talk. I jokingly tell people, if you're talking with me, I'm 80+% into your pipeline. And they kind of look at me. I said, you've already checked out webinars, newsletters, everything. They kind of chuckle because they know it's true. So to stay competitive, vendors must market early and often. If you are only going to clinicaltrials.gov for opportunities, you're chasing trial work. You're already late. You've already lost. So what makes an effective sales system? Okay. Your clients have to have access to expert content. Your key opinion leaders, subject matter experts through newsletters, webinars, case studies, white papers, etc. Okay. This builds a consistent sales pipeline, early outreach, steady lead flow, steady education, different global networks. Okay. That's who it reaches. And it increases your revenue efficiency. You've got to have your executive level expertise talking. Your operations and execution team have to be doing this communication. They don't want to talk to salespeople. They want to know who's managing my trial, who's overseeing the trial, who's executing on it, and what are measures for any type of resolution to an issue. Also, enhanced market penetration. Okay, new geographies. You've got to be able to align with therapeutic partners, okay, or strategic partners, as I referenced before, where a phase one unit and a data management company. That's what also can help build is strategic partnerships. Okay, one last poll. If we can, how are you currently building your sales pipeline? Take a look at these, and again, it's multiple answer options. Okay, thank you. And we're going to move on. Basically, what you're looking for today is, okay, how does the system work? What's going to be good for me as a smaller vendor? So to be able to reach into these sponsors and sites and other partnering CROs. Revenue growth takes precision and partnership. This is a model where you're basically mapping out a calendar of activity, tying it to industry events. You're using social media such as LinkedIn. You can use other platforms as well. You're promoting your people and capabilities, services, and predictable outcomes through newsletters, webinars, case studies, things like that, and reporting all of this activity into your BD. This is what qualifies leads for them. This type of system is what needs to be put into place. Now, one of the things, having a good revenue infrastructure system, it compounds over time. And here's what I mean. It's always on. This is a scenario where on the left-hand side of the screen, a client did 2 webinars over the year. They had 209 people attend those webinars. But over the next 12 months, by pushing out on newsletters, doing webinars, pulling people to specific content and LinkedIn posts, things like that, they were able to identify between the 2 webinars, 1,885 people and 1,349 people who clicked links to go download those videos. That is tremendous data. And this is what I mean by it being on, that it compounds over time. And on the right-hand side of the screen, this was a newsletter that went out for a client. It went out in the top red box. You can see it went out in November of 24. I opened this up in July of 25, and it was just recently opened that month. So 7 months later, that newsletter was still being looked at. That's what I mean by it compounds over time. So these types of revenue infrastructure systems stay on. And this is what it does long-term. This was from 5 clients over 5 years of data from prospecting, how it increased the wide part of the funnel, how it qualified the leads better, how it's established a greater amount of meetings for the BD team, how it impacted their proposals and closed deals. Again, 5 clients over 5 years of what a revenue infrastructure system does. And this is a case study for a client for 6 years of activity with them. When they initially got with us, they were a global CRO, okay, phase 1 to 4, but they were disjointed. They're a large organization without a system in place. So the BD team was just running haphazardly, speaking to whomever they needed, but not telling a consistent message. They had about 3,000 people in their internal pipeline. BioAlliance was able to come in, offer our global database, and over 6 years, we pushed out 5.1 million email newsletters. We reached and had them open over 920,000 times. Their open rate increased from 15 to 34% because of the consistency. The people realized that they were a resource for good educational information, and we had 1.5 million clicks. Okay, those are people going to specific case studies, white papers, things like that. Your collateral material, we are pulling them to you. And we increased over this amount of time their internal database from 3,000 to 6,000. And those are what's referred to as high value targets. They treat them differently than the wide part of the funnel. And if you look within the grid, their webinars, we had 362,000 plus people go to their webinar landing pages. And we had over 16,000 people attend their webinars in a 6-year period. That's tremendous impact. Okay, this is the time now for Q&A, and we do have some questions. Let me pull up some information and we're going to start. All right, our first question, it's from a CRO. It says, what is the biggest reason marketing and BD fail to align in life sciences? Well, I alluded to this slightly, but they're measured on different outcomes. Okay, marketing, they report activity and engagement, but BD's judged on meetings and revenue. And basically, this starts where both teams have to share a definition of what the pipeline and what their ideal client profile is on a staged-based metric that they can tie it to revenue. Okay, what are the stages of being introduced to a new potential client, and then all the way through engagement and winning their business? So I hope that helps answer your question. We've got another question from another CRO. We've struggled to build a consistent pipeline because buyers take months to decide. Please restate. Okay, they recognized I stated that. Please restate how to move it faster, how to move them along faster. Well, stop treating pipeline activity like quarterly campaigns. Okay, you've got to install buyer education tools. And again, those are the case studies, the white papers, newsletters, webinars, things like that. And you've got to show data and metrics. You've got to have these things available. Okay, that will accelerate the timeline for you. It should be able to do that. Another question from a CDMO. What's the fastest way to improve lead quality? I did touch on this a little bit, but you've got to really apply earlier. That means asking those uncomfortable questions. Who's going to be involved? What the timing is? What's your vendor qualification process? How do we get involved with that? You have to ask those ugly questions to basically a younger BD, less experienced BD person who may be uncomfortable asking that. But it's okay to kill deals that aren't going to end up, that you want to end up winning anyway. It's okay to kill them early because you're not wasting time with them. So that's a good way to do that. We've got a clinical lab asking another question. How do we avoid where marketing generates leads that BD can't use? Okay, you got to basically rehashing a couple things here, but create a shared handoff rule. There has to be a defined amount of activity where a client is sales ready before it's turned over. Again, that's part of the qualification process where there's that blend between marketing and BD, where you've got to communicate between right at the point, the wider part of the funnel, to make sure that it's an appropriate lead for you. Okay, we've got time for one more question, which is looks like I recognize them as a small CRO. What should we measure to prove to management? Oh, good question. To prove to management about progress and ROI. Well, you measure stage conversion and velocity, how quickly things are moving in, and those those triggers that you're getting data and buying signals that they're moving forward. Track how the newsletters and webinars are educating them based on tying them to market activities such as ASCO for oncology, safety for world drug safety, things like that. And you're tying that to the influence of meetings that are booked, the cycle time, and then the win rate. Okay, these are what I refer to as board defensible metrics. And it's basically demonstrating pipeline that's been created and that progresses, and where revenues influence based on that. It's not simple activity that does it like what feels like sales. Just because a BD person is busy doesn't mean that they're moving something forward. Okay, it's what the industry refers to as vanity engagement. I got 13 meetings this week. None of them are really qualified. Okay, but they're hoping beyond hope that something could happen. So that hopefully addresses that question for you. And then we are really looking at, that's pretty much where we are for the end of this webinar. I hope that it was useful. And we do hope now that you can download the information that has been triggered up on your screen, a nice little brochure that you can take with you. We do look forward to hopefully having you schedule a call and speaking with you. We'd be more than welcome to give you a revenue infrastructure assessment to see what tools you've got, how you may be able to improve this, and be able to potentially work with you. Please stay tuned to more informational webinars. And until next time, thank you.